Today is the day. Today is the day I defend some form of the game industry. It is on this day that I raise my metaphorical shield and come to the aid of the game dev. Not all of them. This is for the average Joe developer that doesn't want to use their games as some sort of political platform. They just want to make great games. This is for the game developer that got laid off and had to watch the people who led them to failure fail upwards. So let's talk about it. So let's start at the beginning, getting a job in the gaming industry, which honestly seems like an almost impossible task on its own. Not all that many jobs, to be honest. I looked for jobs in the gaming industry in the UK and almost came up with nothing. But the main thing I noticed, apart from the Naughty Dog game designer salary, which seems a bit much, I mean, considering they've made the same game for the last 5 years. No, the main thing that stuck out to me was the amount of, I'm just gonna say, pointless jobs. My favorite was senior people's partner. I don't know what that is, but I'm just gonna assume it's made up and pointless. And I'm gonna assume that this guy is the killer of all things fun. I mean, he probably has a German accent and a stylish uniform. But there is just a lot of bloat. You don't need all of this staff. There are indie teams making these massive AAA teams look stupid. The other thing I noticed was how hesitant they were to put the job salary in the job advertisement. They just said competitive. Competitive with what? What are we being competitive with here? So this went well. I think you have the job. That's great. We never discussed payment. You're being paid competitively. So... competitively. I'm not getting paid, am I? No. But you can talk to the people's partner if you're unhappy. I genuinely think that this is just down to how desperate people are to work in the games industry. That most of the time, they don't even put down the salary they're gonna make, which is kind of a big deal before you waste your time applying for a job. How much am I gonna be making? You know, am I gonna be able to support my family with this? I don't know. Just take the interview and find out. And the salaries I did see was about 23,000 to 28,000 for a junior developer. Not bad. It's definitely 23 though. No chance that it's 28. That advertisement was by an indie developer, and fair play, they didn't even ask for a degree. At the base level entry into the games industry, a degree is basically their qualification requirement to get in. Looks like this team here, though, understands that talent is more important than how many modules you can complete. Not to mention the activist baggage that they'll come with after 3 years of indoctrination. Now, if the rest of the industry could just follow suit, that would be nice. But let's be honest with ourselves, it's who you know in this industry. That's the case for a lot of industries, actually. It's a career where knowing a lot of people gets you a lot of opportunities. So if you're like me, and you're a massive introvert, you're screwed. Luckily for me, I'm self-employed, and I'm a pretty good boss. Actually, my hours are kinda ridiculous. Well, at least I don't get abused in the workplace. Actually, I think I need to speak to HR. My boss keeps putting his hands in my shorts. Anyway, so when you get the job, that's where the fun begins. Let's look at the treatment of Ubisoft employees, shall we? Are you sitting comfortably? Because this is... wow. Aside from layoffs, and more layoffs, there was the rumor that Ubisoft employees got screwed. So hard, even adult industry professionals couldn't stomach this level of screwery. This is yet to be confirmed true. So instead of receiving bonuses for their hard work... Okay, some of them were probably working hard. There's some good stuff in Ubisoft games. Some. Emphasis on some, but instead of bonuses, employees were offered stock shares into the company. And you know, the value of Ubisoft's stock kinda, well, plummeted just a tad. And with the new entity forming with the new IPs, Rainbow, Assassin's Creed and Far Cry, that's kind of their stock becoming worthless. Yes, we don't know if this is true, but with a small stock increase a few months ago, was apparently employees accepting the loss and selling up. Obviously, we don't know if this is true. But would it surprise you? Ubisoft taking advantage of their employees? That's a given by now, right? So I did a little digging and found this information. So it looks like Ubisoft have been implementing this operation since 2016 in an effort to align its employees more closely to the group's development and future performance. So they have been offering this to employees, which would leave those employees kinda screwed. And I also found this, they're launching a new employee shareholding operation, so they're doing it again. So I'm getting two things from this. The employees got screwed, and Ubisoft are not worried about any legal ramifications because they're doing it again. Then, still with Ubisoft, there was an email from the CEO about the Tencent deal. Because Assassin's Creed Shadows was such a huge success, they needed to make a deal just to keep the lights on. Now, the email didn't exactly fill their employees with confidence. Lots of restructured talk. It kinda reads poorly. Thanks for the memories. But we're moving on with our new sugar daddy, who's gonna buy me a whole lot of hookers and fund a new Assassin's Creed game. Yeah, that's what he's gonna do. So Ubisoft employees 2 months on are probably still working day to day, not knowing if they're gonna be working tomorrow. That's all down to poor management, poor hirings, and poor decision making. Whoever's decision it was to make Yasuke the main protagonist of that game deserves to never work in the industry again. Yes, he's the main character by the end of that game. Naoe is very much cast aside. It's not just AC Shadows, it's Ubisoft all over. We'll see if there's any change to Ubisoft in the coming months or years. I don't have any high hopes.
But wait! There's more!
Oh yes, we're still not done with Ubisoft. There's the ongoing court case with former Ubisoft leadership. This case is a weird one. Allegations are forcing their employees to do handstands in skirts and tying them up in elevators. The gaming industry sure sounds fun, right? These allegations sound ridiculous. Like they couldn't possibly be true. But if they were made up, surely you'd make up something more believable, which leads me to think that it is true. I mean, I don't know, but we'll find out. But it's safe to say at this point, the devs at Ubisoft have been through it, man. Poor old Pierre forced to work his 9 to 5, working on AC Shadows after his ideas got rejected. His only source of happiness is his hot French wife, who may or may not be real. Now look, not every company in the games industry is as poorly run as Ubisoft and treats its employees as badly, but it is a common theme. But I think it's fair to say that game devs aren't being treated fairly by the games industry, being seen as more of a resource than human beings. What gets me is that these companies feel like an absent parent, leaving their kids, the game studios, to their own devices, barely checking on them. Then they come back after years of neglect and are shocked to find that the kid is now fat, unhealthy slob that's more bloated than Boogie 2988. And is now involved in some activist hate group on Reddit. And instead of actual parenting and trying to help them out, they just kick them out. We've seen Xbox and Sony shut down studios. It's the same all over the gaming industry. Talking of being used like a resource, let's talk about crunches. Crunches are pretty normal in the gaming industry, occurring about 2 months before a game releases so they can get everything done, leading to apparently 60 to 100 hour work weeks. Let's talk about the most famous crunches, Naughty Dog. The crunch for the production of The Last of Us 2 caused leaks, which saved us all about $60. Proven to be false apparently, it wasn't an internal leak. Well, if Sony and Naughty Dog says it wasn't an internal leak, then it must be true. Back in 2020, former Naughty Dog employee Jonathan Cooper said their reputation with crunches got so bad they struggled to hire experienced devs, which resulted in delays because the staff, though talented, couldn't do the job as fast as a more experienced team. Cooper left after Uncharted 4 and his final paycheck was threatened when he wouldn't sign paperwork to not spill the beans on Naughty Dog's awful treatment of their employees. One employee was even hospitalized from overworking. Teams were pulling all-nighters every night of the week. Really not worth it when you consider what The Last of Us 2 turned out to be. Well done, Neil. Well done. Cooper also said that there were worse stories to tell from his time at Naughty Dog than this. Crunch periods are still a part of the gaming industry culture with basically any game that comes out now. So it's nothing new, but it's worth mentioning with the treatment of game devs. It's not optional work, you'll get replaced if you don't do it. And they should be managed better so they don't have to work double hours when it comes to the release of the game. Overtime is part of every workplace, but I've never heard of it this bad. And it's not just crunches. In January of this year, People Make Games reported on allegations of abuse coming out of Indonesian studio Brandeville, who assisted in the art and animation for Age of Empires 4 and AC Shadows. With employee of Brandeville, Chris Sidney, I hope I'm getting that right, detailing some horrific allegations of abuse from leadership, limiting her sleep, forcing Christian worship, forcing her to write lines, doing quality control over her outfits, sounds like my Catholic school. She was forced to slap herself 100 times as a form of punishment. She was also forced to slam her head into the door frame until she was concussed. I'm starting to feel depressed. This is just one case of many from studios that are used as outsourcing from these massive companies that are treated badly. This is obviously the more extreme, darker side of the industry, but this just follows an ongoing trend of game devs being treated like doormats. Some obviously worse than others. This could be more of a problem with the country they were in. In the report, it does say that the police were under pressure because they weren't doing their jobs properly. But abuse is abuse, and it seems to be widespread throughout the entire gaming industry in various forms. Another issue to take note is the fact that they need to outsource anyway, despite the already bloated teams they have. How do you need outside help when you have that many? Ubisoft is a mess, man. The life of a game dev isn't easy. Some might say it sucks ass, but that doesn't mean they can shift accountability when things go wrong. Bioware. A new article from Jason Schreier detailed issues with EA and Bioware with the production of Dragon Age Veilguard. A list of a lot of issues. It goes something like this. Bioware was under immense pressure to succeed after the failure of Anthem and Andromeda with the Veilguard to stay afloat. Original concept codename Jocelyn was a small license experience. EA forced to pivot to a multiplayer live service format and Bioware's future. Bioware ran 5%. Well, we know EA sucks, but this reads like a you should feel bad for them. They only had hundreds of millions and 4 years of development. How do you expect them to make a good game? Impossible. Feel sorry for them. Do it now. Feel bad. Do it. The shift from a live service multiplayer game to a single player game happened in 2020. They had 4 years of development. 4 years to produce something decent, and they failed. You can't excuse that shit writing. And it sounds like the Mass Effect team knew that this was a hot mess, judging by the fact that they wouldn't let them into meetings. They're just trying to shift responsibility for the game's failure. I do not understand why journalists continue to ignore the fact that the game failed because of how woke it was. It outwoked Star Wars Acolyte. It outwoked almost everything. Paul Tassi even had a little bit of a meltdown on Twitter arguing with influencers. There were many issues with the game, he says. Oh yeah? Yeah. Then why did it get glowing reviews all over Access Media? Huh? Yeah, no, they didn't point out a lot of issues with the game, did they? If there were so many. Paul. I'm sick of journalists lying all the goddamn time. Sorry for the tangent, but we're back on track now. Thank you for your patience. There are so many good devs out there that are suffering from pure incompetency from leadership. There must have been a lot of devs working on that game that just had no direction to follow, except make it more cringe. Almost that whole team was gutted, with some of them being moved over to Mass Effect. You know who's doing okay though? Huh? The game director, with a fancy new job at Netflix Games. Oh, and the writers, the ones responsible for that game becoming the second biggest laughingstock of that year, well, they're working for Sucker Punch and Ghosts of Yotai. I'm telling you boys, the AAA game in space is becoming one big friendship cult. Loads of people lost their jobs after Veilguard. Were they good at their jobs? I don't believe that everyone there was just utterly incompetent. There had to be some talent. There are people being put in positions of power that should be nowhere near it. And so many people are paying the price for these horrendous hiring decisions. If you want to get anywhere high in this industry, you better get on Blue Sky and start making some friends. Make some connections and talk your way to the top. Which goes for any industry, unfortunately, especially entertainment. You can just imagine the poor guy in programming finding out that all of his hard work is being used to make this cringe. There must be a lot of that in the gaming industry, because even if they disagree with it, it doesn't matter. Can't say anything about it. Or that's them fired for being some sort of phobe. I wonder how many closeted Trump supporters there are in the gaming industry. Hiding in plain sight. Yeah. That president of ours sure sucks, yeah. And on top of that, they have to deal with guys like me who spend their time trashing games that they spend all of their life working on. And it's not their fault. They're just doing what they're told to do. And no, I'm not sorry, by the way. When a game is that bad, it deserves to be made fun of. The takeaway is this: it's a tough life being a game dev. It's not a career I choose, but my heart does go out to all the game devs that just want to be a part of something special like what inspired them to get into the games industry in the first place. With a multitude of issues, from crunches to activism to mismanagement to bloated staff teams and to layoffs, the life of a game dev isn't an easy one. Good luck to any game devs out there watching this, because I don't think it's gonna get any better anytime soon. This was a requested video, so I hope you got what you wanted, brother. If you want to see me talk about a specific topic, then shoot away in the comments. I may or may not do it. Just not Alyssa McConte. I really don't want to talk about her. I'll see you in the next one, boys.